Hi, good morning everyone. I'm Amirul and you're watching ASEAN Kita, a show where we explore ASEAN stories, challenges and opportunities. So for more than 5 decades, Australia and ASEAN have shared a dynamic, evolving partnership rooted in mutual respect, shared prosperity and a commitment to regional stability. As ASEAN's first dialogue partner, Australia has played a key role in fostering economic ties, strengthening security cooperation and supporting ASEAN's vision for a more resilient and sustainable future. Now, how can ASEAN further contribute to ASEAN's economic? How can Australia further contribute to ASEAN's economic growth and digital transformation and climate resilience? And as Malaysia takes on ASEAN's chairmanship in 2025, what are Australia's key priorities in working with the region? To discuss these important issues, we are delighted to welcome Her Excellency Tiffany McDonald. Ambassador, thank you for joining us.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Ambassador, Australia has been a steadfast partner of ASEAN given the region's evolving geopolitical landscape. How does Australia envision its long-term role within ASEAN, particularly as Malaysia takes on the chairmanship in 2025?
Well, thank you. Firstly, can I say how lovely it is to be here with you today, Amirul, to talk to ASEAN Kita and your audience about the role that Australia envisages for itself. As you mentioned in your opening remarks, Australia has been a steadfast partner of ASEAN for more than 5 decades now. So way back in 1974, just shortly after ASEAN's inception, our then Prime Minister, Gough Whitlam, said that of all the regional organisations, ASEAN is by far the most consequential, the most important. So it was shortly after then that we became the first dialogue partner of ASEAN, and it was about this time last year that we were in Melbourne commemorating that 5 decades of steadfast partnership with the ASEAN Australia Summit in the first week of March last year. I mentioned that firstly as a really important reference point, because this has been a half a century partnership that has grown and evolved over that time between ASEAN and Australia. I also mention it because in Melbourne last year, the leaders agreed 2 really important documents. One was the Melbourne Declaration, which was 55 paragraphs of shared views on all the issues of importance to our region, from climate to economic to addressing some of the more difficult strategic challenges in our region. They also, the leaders also agreed the vision statement, a partnership for peace and prosperity, which really laid out how Australia and the ASEAN leaders agreed that we should position our relationship for the future. So even though we were commemorating 50 years of partnership, we were already looking forward, and that vision statement really clearly articulated how we see ASEAN's role in the region, the importance of ASEAN centrality, the importance of a rules-based regional architecture led by ASEAN, the convening power of ASEAN to bring the right partners together to talk through some of the most pressing issues facing our region, and building strategic trust. Really having those conversations and building the strategic trust that is something that ASEAN has contributed to across the region since the late 60s now, but really making sure that we were invested in ensuring that central role that ASEAN plays. There was also another piece in terms of, back to your question about how ASEAN and Australia will work together. In addition to commemorating 50 years of partnership last year, we also negotiated what we call the ASEAN Australia Plan of Action. So that's a 5-year plan of action that was negotiated jointly between Australia and the ASEAN member states, and it really identified the priorities of cooperation between ASEAN and Australia. And just to give you a sense of how expansive that is, that plan of action ended up being something like 18 pages to lay out all of the things that we seek to work with each other on, whether it's in the socio-cultural pillar, the economic pillar, or the political and security pillar, or connectivity across ASEAN. So a whole range of mutually agreed priorities for the relationship going forward.
Rightly so, Madam Ambassador, you mentioned about strategic trust, and in 2021, ASEAN and Australia elevated its ties with a comprehensive strategic partnership. And how has this translated into concrete actions, and what key deliverables we can expect in the coming years?
So, thank you for identifying that. We were the first dialogue partner way back in 1974. Then fast forward to 2021, and Australia became one of the first comprehensive strategic partners of ASEAN. And I had the privilege of serving in Brunei as Australia's High Commissioner at that time, and Brunei was the chair of ASEAN in 2021. So I had to work really closely with Brunei as chair, but also the other ASEAN member states and Australia's representatives across the region to explain why it was that Australia wanted to become a comprehensive strategic partner of ASEAN. And it was really important for us to become not just a comprehensive strategic partner in name, but in substance. And we wanted it to be something that unlocked a whole range of new areas of cooperation. So the flagship announcement that was made when we became a comprehensive strategic partner was the Oz for ASEAN's Futures initiative. That was a $204 million program across 10 years. It's still a really important feature, in fact a pivotal feature of our relationship with ASEAN. One of the key elements to that is that it is ASEAN-led. So even though it's an Australian cooperation program, it's really important that the priorities that we deliver under the Oz for ASEAN Futures initiative is framed around the priorities that the ASEANs have articulated to me. So every year I will sit around a table, a boardroom table if you like, with my ASEAN member state counterparts, and we will talk about where is Australia's cooperation going to be most useful to the ASEAN member states. In addition to that, the Oz for ASEAN Futures initiative now has an office in the ASEAN Secretariat. So that's around 13-person multidisciplinary team comprised primarily of staff from ASEAN member states and 2 Australians, and they're really the engine room of driving that Oz for ASEAN Futures initiative. The other engine room for driving the cooperation is around the Oz for ASEAN Scholarships, which was another signature announcement for our comprehensive strategic partnership. And those scholarships are already 100 scholars, Oz for ASEAN scholars have studied a master's level course in Australia. It's looking at the ASEAN outlook on the Indo-Pacific and bringing the ASEAN Outlook on the Indo-Pacific, which is a fundamental ASEAN document, outlook, strategic point of reference, looking at how we can build the capability within ASEAN member states to bring the ASEAN Outlook on the Indo-Pacific to life and to make it a future-ready but also really practical set of initiatives. So we had 100 scholars announced already. We had at the ASEAN Australia Summit last year, we announced another 132 scholarships. We also have Oz for ASEAN Futures fellowships, which were announced at the summit last year, which is bringing mid-career officials from the ASEAN member states to Australia, again to advance the ASEAN outlook on the Indo-Pacific. So all of those things, and they're just to name a few, but all of those things tie together to really make our cooperation with ASEAN, ASEAN-led, but also ASEAN-driven for the people of ASEAN, so that it's not just officials negotiating outcomes, but we're really reaching the people of ASEAN. Just one other data point for you, 6,500 ASEAN officials have already participated in 75 ASEAN-led capacity building workshops as a result of that Oz for ASEAN Futures initiative. So it's really driving capabilities and capacities within ASEAN on the priorities that matter most for ASEAN member states.
That's an interesting approach, Madam Ambassador, because we have been always talking about how to bring ASEAN closer to its people. But I want to move this conversation to trade and economies. With ASEAN being Australia's trading partner, what new opportunities and challenges do you foresee in deepening economic integration, particularly in areas such as supply chain resilience, digital trade, and also sustainable investment?
Yeah, well, firstly, Australia recognises the massive opportunity that exists in the ASEAN member state economies. Already an economy of 660 million people plus. For Australia, ASEAN is already our second largest trading bloc collectively. But we had in 2023, the Australian government commissioned a report, established a special envoy for Southeast Asia, a very well regarded business leader in Australia, Nicholas Moore, who wrote a report based on hundreds of consultations with business, both in Australia and in Southeast Asia, about what more can the Australian government do to unlock the opportunities that exist in Southeast Asia, in the ASEAN member states' economies. And that report gave 75 recommendations, and I think if I could just distill it into its primary objective, it's to build two-way trade and investment into Southeast Asia, which is really quite remarkable to have this political and economic momentum behind a report that is looking at how do we get the Australian business community, the Australian investment community to do more in Southeast Asia. And we see that as really sensible, not only because it will provide an opportunity for the Australian business community to harvest the masses of opportunity that exist across the ASEAN member states, but it will build our economies together. And that, at the end of the day, is one of the most important things, is building our economies together, building the resilience between our economies, in turn contributing to the prosperity in the region. All of these things are only possible because of the peace and stability that the ASEAN member states have managed to achieve. Another major milestone that we passed just last week, actually, was that the ASEAN Australia New Zealand Free Trade Agreement, Australia lodged its instrument of ratification just last week, which means that in a couple of months, just shy of 60 days, we will see what's called ASEAN ANZFTA, the ASEAN Australia Free Trade Area upgrade, come into effect. This is going to unleash even more economic opportunities between our economies. It contains the first sustainable trade chapter in a free trade agreement for Australia. It will unlock more opportunities to make our supply chains more resilient. It will unlock more opportunities in the digital economic space, the renewable energy space. So all of those things are both the government's political will to find new opportunities to open more trade and investment, two-way trade and investment with Southeast Asia, free trade agreements, the digital economic framework agreement, clean energy packages. There's a whole range of activities that I see as really building on the opportunities that already exist there and really driving it forward. Again, for the benefit not just of government-to-government engagement, but this is about delivering benefits for the people both in Australia and in ASEAN member states.
Well, there's still a lot to unpack on ASEAN-Australia ties and future collaboration as Malaysia leads its chairmanship in 2025. But we'll take a short break and we'll be right back after this.
Allahumma salli ala Mustafa. Hidupkan Ramadan dengan pengisian penuh bermakna.
Kasih sayang Allah mentakdirkan sesuatu dengan kuasanya.
Syukuri nikmat kurniaan yang Maha Esa.
Minta ajar Mak mengaji.
Berdoa pula dalam solat kita makbul, insya-Allah.
Terokai keindahan dan keunikan pelbagai budaya untuk dijadikannya sebagai inspirasi.
Ada pengorbanan banget. Yang penting berkat.
Perkongsian tips masakan bersama selebriti terkenal.
Life is beautiful and you are beautiful too.
Drama yang penuh emosi untuk dijadikan iktibar.
Hani sedar, Hani kena minta maaf.
Baik buruk you sekarang, I terima seadanya. Cinta tu kan daripada hati.
Agama tu tiang hidup kita.
Ramadan ini indahnya lain macam bersama Astro.
Debaran semakin terasa. JDT memanfaatkan sepenuhnya peluang. Kerajaan Harimau Selatan tidak akan jatuh. satu kesilapan mampu memusnahkan segalanya. Tekanan semakin memuncak. Sang gegasi kini berjuang ke pusingan seterusnya. AFC Champions League Elite secara langsung di Astro.
Welcome back to ASEAN Kita, a show where we explore ASEAN's opportunities, stories and challenges that lies within the region. And joining us today is Her Excellency Tiffany McDonald, Australia's Ambassador to ASEAN, where we explore ASEAN-Australia's ties and future collaboration as Malaysia chairs ASEAN in 2025. Madam Ambassador, just now we talked about how we want to bring ASEAN closer to its people, trade and economies, and now let's move this conversation to the challenges, geopolitical challenges and maritime security. So given the increasing complexities in Indo-Pacific, including maritime security, challenges and geopolitical rivalries, how does Australia work with ASEAN to reinforce the region's security while at the same time respecting ASEAN's principle of centrality?
So Australia's starting point is that we want a region that is resilient, where the rules of the road are respected. We want a united ASEAN, and we see the centrality of ASEAN, as you mentioned, crucial to maintaining a rules-based regional order with ASEAN at its centre. And that ASEAN-led architecture that it brings parties together to talk through the issues that are confronting the region. So we really see ASEAN's role as central to that. ASEAN's role both through its ASEAN-led mechanisms and its convening power, and also when ASEAN speak. When ASEAN speak, the region listens. So we talked earlier about the ASEAN outlook on the Indo-Pacific. ASEAN speaking out and saying that this is what they expect in terms of the behaviours in the region, the norms that it sets. ASEAN-led mechanisms such as the East Asia Summit or the ASEAN Regional Forum. These are ASEAN-led mechanisms that bring countries together to have discussions about the things that matter most, and also ASEAN's own articulation of the importance of the norms that are set in the region, but that uphold international law, the respect of sovereignty in the region. All of these things are shared principles that Australia agrees with and supports with its engagement with ASEAN. A couple of examples, if you may. We see that the region is under pressure. The rules that have governed us are under pressure, but we also see the role that the ASEAN-led mechanisms can play in having discussions about how are we going to manage these tensions, how are we going to manage the issues that each government is confronting. So last year we partnered with Malaysia actually to put together a workshop that brought government officials, academics and others together to talk about conflict prevention and crisis management and the role that ASEAN-led mechanisms play, because we want a region where disputes are resolved through communication. We do not want a region where misunderstanding leads to miscalculation. So we had a very fruitful discussion about what is it that we can do more to contribute, working through ASEAN-led mechanisms to peace and stability in the region. Another example is that we've been working very closely with the ASEAN member states to institutionalise the expanded ASEAN Maritime Forum, which brings together a whole range of stakeholders to again talk about the issues that are confronting us in the maritime domain, doing things like trying to make sure that we capture all the inputs and academic pieces that are put together to support the thinking and the discussion, because primarily this is about maintaining peace, stability and prosperity in the region, but doing it in a manner that ensures that we use the mechanisms that are in place and that ASEANs themselves have built and driven, and respecting that ASEAN centrality through that way.
Sustainability and climate action is also part of the agenda when Malaysia chairs in 2025. And as ASEAN countries accelerate their green transition, what role can Australia play in supporting ASEAN's sustainability agenda, particularly in the renewable energy, carbon markets and climate adaptation strategies?
I mentioned the Southeast Asia Economic Strategy earlier. And that's certainly one avenue where we recognise that climate and the clean energy transition, huge risks associated for the region, but also huge opportunities. So through the Southeast Asia Economic Strategy, there's been a great deal of work done to try and link, whether it be clean finance or whether it be support for energy regulations. There are a couple of examples of how we're working through the mechanisms in the Southeast Asia Economic Strategy. I also mentioned the ASEAN Australia Special Summit last year. One of the things we did there was we had a number of tracks that led into the leaders' discussion, and there was a clean energy track that brought together thought shapers and business from around the region to talk about where are the challenges, but where are the opportunities. So as a result, there are a number of announcements that were made at that summit that are helping to unlock the opportunities and support ASEAN's energy transition. One of them is the Southeast Asia Infrastructure Investment Facility, a $2 billion mechanism that the Australian government announced to support with things like the green energy transition. We also set up deal teams in the region, which is bringing together Austrade, our trade promotion agency, DFAT, the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, together with Export Finance Australia, so bringing this merged set of expertise together to help find the deals in the region that we can then take back and match with Australian capital. We also, at the Leaders Summit, announced a clean energy package, a $6.9 million package, which is focused on things such as supporting the ASEAN Centre for Energy, establish the right regulatory recommendations for ASEAN member states. The ASEAN Power Grid is another area where we see real opportunity for our support in working with ASEANs to help make the energy market interconnected within the ASEAN member states. So we see that there's a huge amount of complementarity between what Australia has and is doing and also what the ASEANs are doing, and we're really looking at working together to harness the opportunities that come from the energy transition, but also to support the ASEANs adapt and mitigate. And so our development cooperation, across all of our development cooperation in the region, there is a clear focus on how we're making sure that this builds the resilience of the ASEAN member states against the risks posed by climate.
Great. Madam Ambassador, education, skills development and cultural exchanges have always been the key pillars of ASEAN-Australia relations. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more of what new initiatives are being pursued to strengthen talent mobility, upskilling and also youth engagement between Australia and ASEAN itself. Yeah.
Sure, and I think this is such an important part of my job, is to make sure that what we're doing through our ASEAN-led mechanisms is really supporting the youth of today, because they are the leaders of tomorrow. And so I mentioned already the Oz for ASEAN scholarships, and now 100 students already studied in Australia implementing the ASEAN Outlook on the Indo-Pacific. Another 132 scholarships announced at the summit last year. I think there's already about 6 or 8 Malaysian students already on their way to Australia to study masters courses relevant to the AOIP. The fellowships that we're doing, the mid-level career participants to help support not just those that are studying, but those that are already in government. We're also doing things that will support those activities that don't require a long degree, an undergraduate degree or a master's, but looking at things like, I mentioned the Digital Economic Framework Agreement earlier. It's an economic opportunity worth $2 trillion if we can get the digital economic transformation taking place in the ASEAN member states. The ASEANs themselves are negotiating the Digital Economic Framework Agreement. Australia supported that to help expedite the negotiations, to narrow down which areas really will make have the most catalytic difference for the ASEAN member states. But on top of that, we looked at, okay, what about the harmonisation of the digital trade standards across the ASEAN member states? And then what about the jobs and skills that will be required to service the demands in the digital transformation? So we're also supporting vocational training. 350 students from across the ASEAN member states have already engaged in vocational training, which will help with the digital transformation. And then the final piece on that is around the green jobs. It's another priority area for not only Australia but ASEAN. And just last year here in Malaysia, we put on the first ever ASEAN Green Jobs Forum, which brought together stakeholders to talk about what are the skills and jobs that we will need in our economies, in our communities, to really harness the benefits of the energy transition. So all of those things are helping us not just build the capacity here and now, but build the capacity for the future in our next generation of leaders.
As Malaysia chairs ASEAN for 2025, what are Australia's key expectations and priorities in working with Malaysia to shape the regional agenda? And where do you see the greatest potential for impactful collaboration, Madam Ambassador?
Well, 2025 is a really significant year. Obviously, we're delighted to be supporting Malaysia in its chair year. Inclusivity and sustainability really resonates with all of the things that we are doing with the ASEAN member states, and provides us with a great amount of opportunity to continue and deepen that work with Malaysia. 2025 is also a really significant year for the ASEAN member states themselves. They're about to finalise the ASEAN Community Vision 2045. So that'll be the next 20-year strategic vision that the ASEANs lay out for themselves. We have been supporting the ASEANs develop the strategy documents that underpin the community vision, looking at the last 10 years under the previous vision statement, which, by the way, was agreed during Malaysia's last chair year in 2015. Looking at how progress has been maintained under those visions, what are the things that they need to look at in terms of measuring success, where can we do more as we move forward to the ASEAN Community Vision 2045. It's an ASEAN document, but obviously Australia stands ready to support ASEANs in achieving and realising that ambitious goal. I think it's also a really important year for ASEAN member states because this year will be the 20th anniversary of the East Asia Summit, which I've mentioned before is the premier leader-led strategic forum in the region, which brings together leaders from the Indo-Pacific to talk about the most pressing strategic issues. We were very pleased that Australia was a founding member back in 2005, and now this year we'll be working very closely with the Malaysian government and the ASEAN member states to really signal our support for the EAS remaining the premier strategic forum. It's also been a pleasure to work with Malaysia on the whole range of things that we work together on, but it's also, I think, always exciting to be here in Malaysia. Malaysia has always shown great vision and leadership within the ASEAN family, and we're really delighted to have the opportunity to work with them to make Malaysia's chair year the success that we're 100% confident it will be.
Right, so exciting times ahead for Australia and ASEAN. Madam Ambassador, thank you for joining our show of ASEAN Kita today. That was Her Excellency Tiffany McDonald, Australia's Ambassador to ASEAN, for today's episode, where we explore ASEAN-Australia ties and future collaboration as Malaysia chairs ASEAN in 2025. Well, I guess that's all the time that we have for today's episode. Thank you so much for watching and have a good day.